So this afternoon we're going to just talk for a few moments about relationships and how relationships develop, friendships and so on. I remember once I was asked to speak and I was introduced by this young man who got up and said, "We're happy to have Pastor Craig here today, and I just want to say before he begins, because he's going to talk about relationships, that relationships are a bummer." I thought it was a pretty good introduction, you know, set me off on the right foot. He'd obviously had a bad journey, and but he didn't walk out because he was obviously interested to know how to make it better. So, and I want to just talk a little bit about how we ourselves come to relationship and how we find that process works for us. I want to begin by saying this, that the way that we are as human beings, we're all searching for love and intimacy in our lives. In fact, that's the way that we feel. We're hardwired to feel that we matter. I mean, one of the things about loneliness is that you have this feeling that it wouldn't matter if I don't show up because nobody would miss me. We all have a desire to be wanted, to be needed, to belong. And that's the way God made us. Right from the very beginning, God placed Adam and Eve in a relationship with each other, and they were in His image. God is a relational being, if we can put it that way. And what we want to do is to feel that we are accepted and we're understood. That's the thing that matters to us most of all, that other people get us, that they understand who we are, where we're coming from, what our needs are. And our survival depends on our ability to be able to connect with other people and to be able to grow and to maintain healthy relationships. Now, you know, in talking about relationships, I think what Trafford was saying earlier, we're living in a different age today than what I grew up in. It's a technical, communication-oriented society. And you know what? As a result, there are a lot more distractions of a different kind when it comes to being with people and feeling accepted and understood. You know, there's a lot of research now that talks about technoference, which is the interference that technology has in our lives. And it has reduced the amount of face-to-face communication that we have with other people. We spend more time on our phones and tablets and computers than we actually do in face-to-face communication with somebody else. And as a result, relationship satisfaction or feeling satisfied that there are other people there for you is different to what it is when you have more face-to-face communication. It's interesting too that the research shows that people read more on their screens these days than they do from the printed page. And what we know from the research is that people retain 47% less from what they read on their screen to what they read on their book or piece of paper, whatever. Now, that affects the way we communicate with each other. It affects what we expect from each other. And the thing about communication through technology is that, well, you know, because you've experienced this, that you can read a text message in about 100 different ways, right? It's possible that you read something, but you interpret or you read into that what you feel is being said. So it makes communication a lot more complicated, and you need to be able to check out what actually is being said. Right? But you don't do that with text messages because they're only about 5 words long, see? So the interesting thing about that is the impact that that has on relationships and the way that we connect with each other. See, I'm saying that our survival and well-being depends on our connecting. Now, the other piece about this is this, that for years researchers have told us that in the communication process, 95% of the message that you communicate is communicated non-verbally. 5 to 7% of the meaning of what you meant is in the words. Right? So in technology, when you send a message, the words, there's 90% of the message at least that's intended that you miss because you don't have face-to-face communication to read the body language, to hear the tone of voice, to get the nuance that conveys the meaning. Right? So that's where relationships have become a lot more tricky, complicated, difficult. But our survival depends on our feeling connected. You know, we want to be understood, we want to be loved, we want to know that we belong. It matters. If I don't turn up and it doesn't matter to you, then, you know, that impacts the way I feel about myself. And I might want to just isolate myself. So when we search for that one true love, to find the love that we're looking for, it's a complicated process. And I know in the church, you know, that we often say, God has one person out there for you. I don't know what you think about that, but that seems to make it sound very simple. And just hope that God turns that right person up for you. But you have to be actively involved in the process of community to actually make contact, to find the love that you're looking for. Maybe God's in there in the process, but He doesn't take away from you the responsibility of finding it and making it happen. Right? So there are two basic psychological needs that we all have. The first one is the need to belong. That's a basic need that we all have. Psychologically, it's important for us. And relationships work when connection happens and you have this sense of, I belong in this relationship. You know, this is a safe place for me, right? So there's that desire to be loved and to give love, and with that there develops a strong emotional connection or bond. When I talk about love, it's a difficult word in the English language to define. You know, what do you mean by love? And I'll guarantee if I went round the church and asked for your definition of love, we'd probably get as many definitions as there are people in the room. We all have our own sort of understanding of what it is. Some of us think that it's a good idea. Some of us think it's a good feeling that you have when you're with someone, makes you feel good. What actually is it? Right? And I like to use the word or words, an emotional connection. When two people are emotionally connected with each other, it sounds to me like there's some energy, there's some belonging, there's some connection that's taken place in which they're bonded to each other. They feel special. They feel able to share themselves and be understood. Right? That emotional connection. If you ask me what's the heart of marriage, you know, when the Bible talks about becoming one flesh, to me, that's really talking in our language, the emotional connection, the intimacy that two people share when their hearts are bonded to each other. Right? Now, the second need that we have is a need for significance, that we do matter and that we are competent and able to do things so that you're affirmed as a person of worth, right? It's important to feel respected and valued. Now, when you're in a relationship, if you don't convey those messages to your partner or to your lover or to your friend, then that doesn't build any sense of connection. You know, you want to know that you as a person are respected and valued for who you are. Right? It might be different to what your partner is, but the difference is sometimes the things that you want to affirm and share with each other. And that's what gives you that sense of significance. Gaining significance comes from the affirmation of others or that special person in your life. We search for the person, the experience, or the object that will meet these two basic needs. That's what this journey is about. It is about finding a place where we feel understood, we're accepted for who we are. And sometimes we find that kind of experience in a certain person, an experience, an object in our journey in life. If we fail to fulfill these needs, we inevitably struggle with relationships. And I'll talk in just a moment about what some of those barriers are that stop you from that feeling of connectedness, a sense of fulfillment. Now, I want to say this, that I think when we talk about relationships, friendships generally, the quality of our lives depends on the quality of our relationships. Now you think about this. From the moment that you were born and brought into this world, the greatest impact on your life, not just physically but emotionally and spiritually, is how other people relate to you or treat you. So the quality of your life is very much influenced by the quality of the relationship. Our lives are shaped by the people who love us and by the people who refuse to love us. Right? Growing up in your family, whatever family was to you, the primary people in your lives from the moment that you came into this world has an impact on you and your ability to reach out to other people. If you've been put down, if you've been ignored, if you've been pushed aside, if you don't have a sense of real belonging in family, if you don't feel significant, that has a tremendous impact on your emotional well-being. And it inhibits your ability to connect with other people because it creates a great sense of negativity in your own thinking about yourself, makes you feel insecure and uncertain, that people don't really like you or that they don't care about you. So you grow up with those emotional needs not being met or met in ways that are inhibiting or negative to you. The quality of our lives depends on the quality of our relationships. Very much so. Now, what I'm also saying is that there is nothing more wonderful than having a good relationship, good friends, people who are there for you, people who you can relax and be yourself with. Now, the problem is that a lot of us, because of those insecurities or uncertainties, we find it safer to wear a mask, to hide our feelings. And so when it comes to relationships, it gets a little more tricky now because there are some things I don't want you to see, which makes it a little more difficult for us to connect openly, caringly with each other. So we bring often a lot of deficits to the table. We're reaching out, we desperately want to belong, to feel significant, to be loved and appreciated, but there's stuff that we have that gets in the way of us being able to do that openly and freely. And so that's an inhibiting factor in our relationship. It's interesting to me that friendship is a way that inoculates you against a lot of life's problems, because if you feel nurtured and supported, that sustains you, that gives you strength to face some of the problems or difficulties that you might face, when you have a friend that stands beside you, when you have a friend that will hold your hand and walk the journey with you, it gives you strength. It helps you to feel I'm not alone. See? So it's what I'm saying is that's the way we're wired. That's the way God made us. And we yearn for that. We're looking for it. And as we grow up and fall out of love with our parents and fall in love with somebody else, we want to find that safe place. We want to find that kind of experience where we feel connected. It's interesting that the Bible in the book of Proverbs, which is like a father talking to his son, where there's a lot of wise advice about life, and I've just picked out a couple of the comments that are made here. The first one, do a favour and you win a friend forever. Nothing can untie that bond, right? There's that sense that when you go out to connect with somebody else and it's a positive experience, there's a bond that's formed that's a very strong bond. And that's what friendship is about. Friends come and friends go, but a true friend sticks by you like family. Now, I don't know about this one. It needs a bit of interpretation, because if family hasn't been all that good, you don't want them sticking by you. So, but I think what he's saying here is this, that family is typically a place where you are accepted how you are, the way you are. You're understood, right? And you're loved for who you are. And a friend is somebody that's like family, that is close and accepts you for who you are and loves you anyway. Just as lotions and fragrances give sensual delight, so a sweet friend refreshes the soul. And from a human point of view, it's true to say that when you are with a friend and you feel safe and you have a good time and you share together, it does something for your spirit. There's a kind of like an energy boost that comes from being together and being excited together and being bonded in such a way that your hearts kind of beat together almost, you know what I'm saying? And there's this sense that it brings real refreshment and joy to your heart. So I put down here 3 things that a friend is. First of all, it's someone who accepts, respects and understands you, right? That's what we've been saying so far. It's also someone who listens and connects with you, right? They hear you, they understand that your point of view or your feeling might be a little different to theirs, but they listen and they connect, they understand that, right? No judgment. Just accept you. And we talk about unconditional love is what we crave for, and that's what God offers us. That in spite of our brokenness, our woundedness, God listens to our need and He connects with us and He offers us hope. And thirdly, it's someone who affirms and supports you. Someone who's on your side. You know, and one of the things that, what's that called? The 5 love languages? You've done this test, haven't you, Roger?
Yeah, I failed it.
You failed it? No, I'm not going to ask you what your love language is, but one of them is about, affirming and being supportive, That's a very strong language for some people. And for all of us, we need to be affirmed for who we are and supported. That's what a friend does, all right? So why is it so hard to make friends? Okay, this comes back to what I was just saying before about what we bring to the table, or what sometimes stops us from coming to the table with any kind of openness without feeling scared or holding back. So the first thing is, some of us grow up and we're rather shy, don't want to put ourselves forward. When I was growing up as a child, I was still shy then. If the teacher asked a question in school or in Sabbath school, and was looking at me for me to answer, and I mostly always had an answer, I'd be so embarrassed that I'd just go bright red. Right? And it's a little bit like it inhibits you from wanting to be in the group and suddenly be zeroed in on and, asked it. So it puts the spotlight on you, and I found that hard. A lot of my friends who know me now find it very hard to understand that there's a lot of introvert in me, and that comes out of my sense of shyness. Right? So that's one thing. Another one is a fear of rejection. And like I was saying before, that if you have grown up in situations where you've been pushed aside, where you've been ignored, where nobody wants to listen to you, oh, shut up, who wants to hear from you? It's like that really does something to your psyche, It really cuts deep. And you're afraid of rejection, or if you've been in a relationship and you've been dumped, or you've been spurned by somebody, and you kind of feel that you are somehow damaged or rejected by that whole... it's a deep thing that stops you. So you become afraid of taking the risk of connecting with people. You're a little more cautious. You put the mask on and you kind of don't give too much away, because when you've been hurt, you don't want to be hurt again. Right? So that's often what stops us from making friends, because we're holding back. We're not really allowing ourselves to be fully known, because we simply don't trust ourselves with them, and we don't trust them to respond to us in the ways that we think would be helpful. Another thing is that depending on how you grow and mature in life, you may or may not have learned the skills of communicating, making friends, being able to problem solve, deal with difference, conflict, and so on. So you have poor social skills, the ability to reach out, to be open, to connect, to talk, to share with other people. You never really were taught that, particularly if you grew up in a situation where you were told, be quiet. Nobody wants to hear from you. Right? Or if you did say something, you were put down. Where'd you get a stupid idea like that from? So immediately that has an impact on you, and so you don't really learn good skills for making friends, for making conversation, for connecting with other people. The mask is a protection, and if you haven't learnt those skills, then you become poor at talking and listening and showing friendliness. Another thing is that in all of this sort of growing up and discovering ourselves and finding that we're not always accepted or understood, we start to talk to ourselves. Right? In other words, what I'm saying is that we define who we are in the face of other people. How other people respond to us, we get a sense of, well, that must be the sort of person that I am, because they keep telling me that I'm an idiot, I'm dumb. When you get those sort of messages, what happens is you take them on board. There's a principle in parenting that says children live up to the expectations that are placed on them. So if you're constantly given negative messages, you start to think, that's who I am. And you develop this kind of self-defeating attitudes. I'm no good, I can't do it, this doesn't work for me. And as a result, when you come to the table, if you like, when you come to connect with other people, you got this dialogue going on in your head saying, be careful, don't say too much here, you'll make a fool of yourself, they'll laugh at you, they'll reject you. And so then you go into shy mode or you withdraw because you've got what I call stinking thinking going on in your head. You talk to yourself about yourself, right? And that's a huge barrier to having an open friendship or connection with somebody else. And in today's world, you know, it's complicated because there's a lot going on in people's lives and there's a lot of people with a lot of self-defeating attitudes. Now I say that not in a, I'm not wanting to be negative, but you know, we're living in an age which is probably the most dysfunctional when it comes to relationships because there's been a lot of family breakdown, there's been a lot of individual anxiety and depression and loneliness and things that are the result of the way we've been treated in life, the way we see ourselves in life, that it makes connection difficult. That's what we bring to the table, some of that stuff. So we feel inferior. Maybe we're intolerant of difference. We've grown up with that. Or maybe we're just self-absorbed. We've learned, I survive best when I just do it my way and keep to myself and don't worry about anybody else. And I got a lot going on that I want to achieve in life, so I don't need other people. But you do. And then, of course, there are self-defeating behaviours where we're critical or negative, aggressive, defensive, boring, aloof, jealous, possessive, a whole range of ways we behave that don't exactly draw other people to us. You know, when you act in some kind of a super critical way, everything's wrong, everything's not happening right. You know, after a while, being around somebody who's always criticising, you get tired of that, don't you? You just want to say, oh, buzz off, leave me alone. You know, go and live your negative life somewhere else. So as a result, those self-defeating behaviours, you know, they don't welcome connection. And so we kind of, you know, find ourselves being defeated in our desire to connect. Now, just briefly, we need to understand too that there are different levels at which we connect with other people. Some people are what I call a level one, or they're acquaintances, they're casual friends, and most of us have several hundred of these people that we know who live in our street, who go to our church, who we see at work, and they're what we call friends, people we know, people we feel okay or safe with, but we don't know them very well. You know, it's a kind of superficial, you know. They're acquaintances, they're people we know and we feel that we can call them friends because they're friendly to us, we're friendly to them, but it's a kind of what I call a superficial level of friendship. Then there's what we might refer to as close friends. These are people that we're willing to share openly of ourselves with. They may be people who are associates at work, who we've gotten close to, we've bonded with, we've connected with through work. And at work we share of ourselves and we feel understood, we feel supported. So these become people that we might even turn to when we're in a crisis or a difficult moment. We can turn to our close friends, right? They may be someone who's a mentor. Now, I had for many years a teacher who became a mentor of mine really after I'd left school. But our paths crossed. He was always a great friend, a mentor to me. And whenever I went to see him or visit him, it was like we just sit down and begin the conversation where the last one left off with might have been 2 or 3 years or more ago. But we were safe with each other, we were comfortable with each other, we could share with each other. And that was a good, close friend. And then there may be people that are personally, we've met in some place, church, family events, whatever, that become very close personal friends. They know us, they care for us, they would be there for us whenever something happened and we needed support. Right. Then the third level is what I would call intimate or the best friends. Now, the interesting thing is that a number of researchers have suggested that most people have about 2 or 3, at the very best, the very most, people who they would consider, to be intimate friends. This is what marriage aspires to. 2 people become one flesh, to become bonded to each other. They're intimate friends. They know each other intimately. And the sad thing is that there's a growing number of people who have no intimate friends. You know, there are people I know from my experience over the years in marriage counselling, that there are people who are in marriage but who are very lonely because there is no longer a friendship or connection. Right? Now, we're talking about this process of understanding love, and it's interesting that Proverbs makes this comment. There are 3 things that are too amazing for me. No, 4 things that I don't understand. Right? And he says, the way of an eagle in the sky. Well, that's still mysterious and wonderful to me. Don't really understand it all. I'm not into aerodynamics and all that sort of stuff, but imagine someone saying this in this particular context, the way of a snake on a rock. That's so mysterious, I'm running the other way. Right? The way of a ship on the high seas. Frighten the living daylights out of me. And then the way of a man with a maiden. Right? He could have also said the way of a maiden with a man, but, that's, I think, what he meant. So there's something very difficult to understand about this whole process of relationship and how it works. So what is this thing called love that we talk about? Some people say it's the call of the wild. That's the way we're wired. Recent discussions about sexual identity and gender identity and all that would make us wonder whether, what that's all about. We are called from the wild. We're driven by nature to meet, to mate and to procreate. Well, that's kind of a light way of describing the whole kind of process and journey. We have a capacity to love, an urge to merge. Right? A way of trying to describe this desire for an intimate connection, and an intimate emotional connection with another person that meets all of the needs that we've been talking about and the desire to connect. Right? It's about seeking the best interests of the other person. That's actually the biblical definition of love, where you are willing to give of yourself totally for the best interests of somebody else. Right? That's what genuine love is about. And I've just put here, it's about feeling emotionally connected, about feeling safe, feeling respected, feeling valued. Things that we've already talked about there. So, in this whole process of being emotionally connected, this bond that, intimate friendship is about, there are 3 keys, 3 things that are important to build emotional connection in a relationship. The first is that where there is a mutual concern about the other person, a trust in the other person, and a respect for them. Respect for another person is critical if you're going to have an intimate, safe relationship. To be concerned, understand their journey, to trust them and to respect who they are. Right? The second thing is to be emotionally available. That where you are emotionally, if you like, present, you're available. You can share yourself openly and you can hear the other person's concerns. So you're there, you're available emotionally, you're open to sharing. That's important. And that you're also responsive. You know, a relationship works when it's two-way. You know, I want to hear your story and I tell you my story in order that you might understand me. Right, so that there's responsiveness, a willingness to listen and empathise. Now, I just want to finish by talking about, so how does a relationship develop? And I take a kind of a, you might say, developmental view of how relationships develop, and the marriage relationship develops along similar lines. I'd probably use a few different words to what I'm going to use about relationship generally, but this is true. Of all relationships tend to follow a certain pattern. Now there may be some cultural nuances that might add a little bit of a change or difference to some of this, but generally speaking this is how it happens the world around. First of all, there is this sense of attraction. And we might use this word in applying it to talking about an emotional or intimate relationship. You know, first of all, you are attracted towards the other person. In all relationships, you know, you are attracted towards somebody else, not in a sexual or romantic sense, but in a relationship you are drawn to them because you like them. You're attracted to their qualities, to their energy, to their whatever it is that, you know, gets you and gets your attention, you're attracted. You're drawn to it. Now, often in a romantic relationship at this stage, this is what we often refer to as a stage of infatuation, where you are particularly focused on certain aspects of the other person that interest you, that excite you, that sort of grab your attention. You know, like it may be the way she walks, you know, and you go, whoa, yeah, man, did you see that? Whew. You know, and then you get all faint and just fall on the ground, you know. There is always in a relationship a beginning point of where you are drawn to, you are attracted to something about the other person. Maybe their looks, it may be their character, it may be the way they present themselves, it may be their energy, it may be... And we focus on that one thing. I remember when I was at school, there was this beautiful redhead. And I fell in love. Well, I thought it was love. She had beautiful peaches and cream complexion, you know. Just, couldn't concentrate on anything else. You know, and she had these two beautiful dimples, you know. When she smiled, I just melted. Very attractive. And after about 3 weeks, I suddenly realised that I wasn't in love with her, I was in love with her dimples. It all went belly up right there, you know. It's over, finished. And see, that's what happens with infatuation. It's fickle, you know. And if it doesn't mature beyond that, then the relationship will probably crash. Then there begins to develop some real sense of I'm attracted to you romantically, right? There's a sense in which I don't want to be misunderstood when I say this, but the relationship becomes a little sexualized. You know, you're drawn to them. There's a sexual attraction thing happening here now. So, but you're aware of it and you're drawn to it, right? And this is a stage that can be very innovating and exciting and can easily get out of control because you can go with your feelings. You can go with how it makes you feel. It puts a spring in your step and it makes you kind of, hard to concentrate on anything else. Right? And it's at this stage that you start to become aware that we're an item. It's special. Now, let me just stop at this stage and say there's something a little more complicated that goes on when you are looking for a partner and attracted to someone online, for the reasons I've said earlier, that it's a little different dynamic. And in my view, see, I'm an old troglodyte, I've sort of come from another era, but there are a lot of messages and nuance that get lost in that process. You've got to take a few risks. And sometimes the risks work for you and sometimes they don't. I'm just saying. Okay? So then there comes this moment when we sort of want to make a commitment that we're in a relationship with each other. Now, this is not a commitment to get married. This is not a commitment that we're, going to live together. Although sometimes that becomes a bit blurry. And this is where there are real dangers in a relationship, if you're not aware that in this early commitment stage where you are saying, we're going together, or what's the expression we use today? We're seeing each other. So this is a moment when there's an agreement. And I call this an early commitment stage. This is where you're making a commitment to the relationship. You're not making a commitment to live together for the rest of your lives, right? And after a period of time, and most of the research shows that a good quality relationship tends to take about 2 years to develop, to get to the commitment to marry or live together, whatever. All that's been messed up today because of the ease with which couples are able to fall into a relationship and a sexual relationship and living together with each other. But this opens up as you get to know each other and you begin to see your differences. You begin to realise that, there are some things that I'm finding a little hard to take. And we start to argue about our differences. We start to recognise that I can't deal with that. So what do? And often this is where, we start to fight and we have disagreement, and it's a rocky stage of the relationship. All couples go through this. It depends on the intensity with which they experience it. Maybe that's a reflection of their personalities or their journey or whatever, but this becomes a power struggle as to, who will win, who will give ground, who will understand more, And most couples find this to be a difficult period, and it's a time when you start to say to yourself, do I really want to be in this relationship? A lot of couples break up at stage 4 because they can't see this working, right? There are differences, there are difficulties, and they don't have a way to resolve them. Now, that may also be that they have very bad skills when it comes to conflict resolution. So the way they go about winning the argument is that I win or I'm gone. Right. So it's a difficult period, and it can be difficult for couples to know how to negotiate their differences. But often what happens in relationships is this: you either break up or you accept the reality and you work through it and you say, yes, there are differences, but we really do care about each other, we really love each other, we can make this work. Or there are some people who say, you know what, I don't think I'll get a better offer anywhere else, so, I'm just resigned myself to the fact that there are some things I just have to live with. Right? So you either resolve, you resign, or you run away. Right? Now, this is also true in a marriage relationship. We know that after about 7 years in a marriage relationship that you really start to hit a stage when, some people call it 7th year, is it 10 years or 7 year itch? I don't know, I think the itch comes a bit earlier these days, I'm not sure. So it's difficult. And you've got to make a decision. What are you going to do, even in marriage relationship? Families go through the same sort of process. As more kids come into the family and so on, it becomes more complicated. So this stage now of resolution or resignation. And we decide whether we go on or we won't. Or maybe we'll go on, but we'll accept that this is as good as it gets and might as well take it and work with it. So then this leads to stage 6, where we feel really comfortable about the relationship. We feel that there's a future. We really want to be together. It's good together. So the conversation goes around, you know what? We should do this forever. And that usually leads to stage 7, which is the beginning of a development into a mature, long-term relationship. Now, there's one other thing that I want to say about this, is that from my point of view, it seems that there are a lot of couples these days who make one big misjudgment. And that is that they think that they're at stage 6 when they're really at stage 3. They mistake the early commitment for a full commitment. And so they find themselves getting quickly involved in a romantic, a sexual relationship. They may even decide that. And of course our attitudes towards marriage have changed in our culture, where we sort of say to ourselves, you know what, you want to try out, try before you buy. Well, that's a bit crass, because most people don't think of it in those ways. They think that they will live together and see how this develops. And I know that some couples that I've talked to about the level of their commitment, they've said, oh, we're committed. It's our intention to be together forever. But it's easy for us to get out of it, which I find difficult, because I've never found anybody who found walking away from a committed relationship where they've been intimate that's found that terribly easy. You're dealing with an emotional connection that when it's disconnected, when it's broken, it's very difficult to deal with. It's shattering, right? So that's why I'm from the old school that says, that think about what's happening here and don't make life more complicated. But nobody's listening to that. We do it the way that we do it in our culture. And sometimes, for a lot of people, it does work. For others, there are more adjustments and changes that have to be made. So, as we talk about relationships, this is something that God gave to us. He placed us in relationships from the very beginning. And He wants us to be intelligent in the way in which we go about connecting with one another and building that relationship that sustains itself over a lifetime. Well, that's it for me.
Okay.
Did
I've got that.
this yours, or did
No.
somebody send it?
Somebody sent it.
Yeah, no.
How can one get over the fear of being judged when they open up about their deeper inner feelings?
Whoa, yeah.
If you want to add, Trav, feel free to do so.
Just read that to me again, because I think...
How can one get over the fear of being judged when they open up about their deeper inner feelings? So if you open up, there's a possibility that somebody may judge you, so you kind of put the lid on what you want to share.
The greatest risk that we take in life is to go out of ourselves to love another. It's a risk. I mean, how do I know I can trust you? That's why I think it's important to allow our friendship, our connection to grow over time, because we're both testing each other out.
Yeah.
We're both wanting to know, is this safe? And when you do something that really hurts me, I take a step back, and I have to ask myself now, I really like Roger, but I don't want to have this happen all the time. So it's a risk.
Yeah.
The greatest risk you take in life is to love somebody else.
What role does trust play in this sort of relationship? Yeah.
Well, as I was saying, it's critical to emotional connection. And when you feel judged, when you feel that somebody is looking at you to, find fault in you or to point out your mistakes, of course, I'm on the defensive. I pull my mask down and I'm saying, I need to protect myself from being hurt. The worst thing in the world, or the hardest thing in the world to deal with, is hurt, pain, So that's why I feel I err on the side of caution when it comes to relationships. Don't rush in. Take time to be sure that it's developing in a strong and healthy way. Because, and as you say from the question, when somebody feels judged, it's not easy to get over.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of, and in some cases, the judgment might be fair, but it doesn't make it any easier to hear or deal with.
Yeah.
So in a friendship, you want to be gentle, and you want to be respectful. If I start criticising you for something about you, you immediately feel defensive, right? And defensiveness is the best way to slow down or break a relationship.
Yeah.
Because when you're defensive, you don't listen to a word I'm saying anymore because you're too busy defending yourself.
Yeah, that's a good comment. Anybody else has a comment? I have a question to share with Dr. Brian Craig. Yes, Ben? Let me share the mic with you.
Yeah, Dr. Brian, if you could just comment about, I think you mentioned earlier about friendships and being friends with people and confidants and that kind of thing. How, either from the giving advice or the receiving advice side, where either a friend is trying to thrust two people together, how do you relate to that? Do you go along with it, or do you run the other way, or and also if as a friend you can see a couple are getting together that you don't think are compatible or equally yoked or suited, how is that handled as well?
Only one question. You finished?
No, I had one more. And can you just comment on the role, say, of a potential couple, their relationship to God and prayer in the development of the relationship?
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, well, at the heart of, the first two questions that you were asking, I think number one is every individual has a responsibility to make their own choices. Now, there's nothing wrong with, people being introduced to each other by somebody else. You need to have the freedom, though, to make your own choice and not feel bound by your friendship with somebody else or somebody else's idea about what would work for you. I mean, I know of plenty of people that have been introduced to each other, blind dates and all the rest of it, and it's been the best thing that ever happened because they ended up happily married for the rest of their lives. But I suspect that they made a choice to do that. And, I mean, part of relationships too is respect, respecting each other. As I said before, that's the heart of any relationship, that if you don't respect the other person for who they are, you might as well give up, because a relationship is so undermined by that lack of respect that it becomes a one-sided or, lopsided, relationship. And to me, I think respect, as Traff was saying as well, all the research that John Gottman has done, number one issue in any relationship is respect. Now, in terms of your final question, you got the trifecta today, about praying together. I mean, again, I think that this is a choice that a couple make. If it is a reflection of their journey and their Christian commitment, then it's a really, bonding experience that they can involve God in their relationship, and they're expressing honestly to God how they feel about their relationship with each other and what they desire for it, and to ask God to guide and to bless them in that journey. I think that's a very powerful way to enhance the bonding process. But it's something, again, that shouldn't be forced. It should be something that grows out of who you both are and your desire.
Yeah. Here's another question. What role does prayer have in finding a spouse? And then what advice would you give in who should you go to for that multitude of counselors?
You're the pastor here, aren't you?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Well, I opened myself up to this, didn't I, by my earlier comments about God having one person for you out there, The reality of life is that it doesn't really work that simply, I don't think. And I remember that my wife wasn't really happy with me very early in our relationship when I said, there's probably 100 people out there that I could choose to live with, but I chose you. She wasn't happy with that idea at all. In her mind, it was like, it's the two of us.
It's made, yeah.
And we did have the sense that the hand of God was in bringing us together and so on. That was an awareness that, I never heard a voice. I never saw red lights or green lights flashing that sort of gave me the go or the stop or anything like that. I think that God expects us to make our choices, but to be led and guided by Him.
Yeah, yeah.
And I guess when I say that, I mean led by His values, His was going to say common sense, that I think he has a full dose on that.
Yeah.
So I don't personally have the idea that there's one person out there that God has for me. I might spend the rest of my life travelling the world to find where that person is. I have no idea.
Yeah, thank you. The next question is how to handle stage 4. More elaboration, please, and thank you. How do you handle stage 4? And a little more elaboration or explaining.
Yeah, that's a good question, eh?
Yeah, it is.
Because I think, as Traff was saying earlier, you know, conflict is it's the thing that really grabs our attention and is probably the thing that, I'll put it this way, the way we deal with conflict determines the health or the longevity of the relationship. Right, so knowing how to deal with difference, it's an interesting thing, Roger, but nobody ever teaches us how to do this. We grow up and we learn how to deal with difference by observation.
Yeah.
You know, how our parents did it. If they did it good, we copy it. If they did it bad, we don't want to know about it. So I think it's one of the big issues of life, that knowing how to deal with difference in all aspects of life, but particularly in a relationship, is a really, really difficult thing. I mean, even in church, you know, we deal with conflict the way we've learned how to do it, which is sometimes not real good.
Yeah.
Right? So it becomes a problem. And most couples feel defeated by conflict in their relationship because they don't know how to deal with it effectively.
Okay.
And that's the moment when they need to get some help to see that there are ways of dealing with it positively that might get them to compromise or might get them to resolution in ways that are healthy and productive for the ongoing relationship. If you don't know how to do it, and you get, I mean, that's why most couples who run into difficulty at stage 4 and don't know how to resolve it because it's so intense, and when you deal with conflict differently to me, I don't understand you. I don't understand where you're coming from. Why would you be so pig-headed and so nasty to somebody you love? And you're thinking exactly the same about me. Right? So it becomes a stalemate. It's just like, I don't know how to deal with this. You know what? We're better away from each other. Right? So what I'm saying is, if that's a difficulty, it's not, as Traff said, it's not a sign of weakness to reach out to somebody you trust. Give me a few clues on how to deal with this, because I really want this relationship, but I'm stuck.
Thank you. I should say that Pastor Dr. Craig, you served as a marriage counselor at the division office, eh? For how long did you do that? Family ministries?
Well, yeah, for the whole time I was there.
Well, yeah. The next question, should you love yourself first before finding someone to settle with or share the companion with others and not be alone? Should you love yourself first before finding someone to settle with?
Yeah. Let me just start with the first few words.
Okay.
Loving yourself. If that means that you are self-centered and arrogant, no. But if by that question you're asking, should you feel good about yourself? In other words, what you would use as a psychological term, have a solid sense of self. You know who you are, you know what your values are, you have good boundaries around your self. the stronger and healthier you are as a person, you bring that to the table, that's what's going to create a much better relationship than if you bring all of those self-defeating and difficult barriers to a relationship. Sure, it's going to create a lot of problems. So, you know, sometimes you end up saying kindly to somebody, you really need to sort yourself out first before you go connecting with somebody else and messing up their life as well. Because oftentimes what we do, and we don't realise that we're doing it, but we work out our dysfunction on somebody else. You know, and I see this too. Like a lot of people bring their dysfunction to church and hope that church will solve their problems. Well, you know, the church is not a place where people get that kind of solution. That's what God does in your life. And it's a result of you being honest about yourself and the needs that you have to be a good, healthy, balanced individual. The word I use is having a solid sense of self, you know. And after all, Jesus said that it was important to love others as you love yourself. Right?
I'll make this the final question, and this is it. When you're lonely, relationships seem to be the answer. Are they when you have been waiting and praying for that special someone for a while? How do you keep the faith, so as to speak? Let me read it again. When you're lonely, relationships seem to be the answer. Are they? Second part to that question is, when you've been waiting and praying for that special someone for a while, how do you keep the faith, so as to speak?
Yeah, and I mean, I empathise with that question because I think that when you're in a lonely or alone space, it's not a comfortable space to be in. And if you are tempted to find a solution in somebody else ending or solving that loneliness, there's a risk involved in that, because somebody else can't make you or complete you if you feel lonely within yourself. Because loneliness, and don't misunderstand me when I say this, but I think in a lot of cases loneliness is something that we do to ourselves, or that happens to us that we embrace because of maybe what's going on inside us, the messages we have about ourselves, the fear we have about reaching out to people and not being embraced. So we withdraw, we cut ourselves off, and then maybe there is that magical thinking that somebody will solve all of that. There's a good chance that a lot of it could be answered by that new relationship. But if there's any sense of loathing or personal withdrawal inside of you, it may be that the relationship will bring that out and make you feel safe and so on. And I think that can happen. You know, sometimes we heal in the face of a non-shaming person. You know, someone who accepts us and brings us out of that place can help us to feel very differently about ourselves and about life. But I'm just expressing the caution that it's not a simple answer to simply leap in. See, I've had people say to me, you know, I'm desperately lonely and I felt rejected and I felt, you know, that life was a bummer and it sort of left me on the shelf. And I felt that, you know, by jumping into a relationship, jumping into bed together, it felt wonderful. And it changed my life. for a short stage. And then I started to hate myself again, because I realised that that didn't give me what I really was looking for. I was using that sexual relationship as a way to, solve my issues. So, to come back to the question, loneliness is a very hard and difficult place to be. Just be careful that, see, what I would say, and this is my bias, I would say if you're in that dark place, it's better to go and talk to somebody and try to get your handle on what's going on, rather than work it out by means of a relationship that may or may not end up solving the problem, because the problem is not the relationship, it's what you're bringing to the table within yourself. Now, that's a difficult one to talk about.
Sure.
Let's pray. Gracious Father in heaven, we just want to thank you for the information and the wisdom that has been shared with us last night and today through these presentations, dear Lord. And we know it's given us a better understanding of how we can better our relationships in the context of our families, Lord. And we just pray for a blessing on each home, dear Lord, that represented here, and also our church here at Waitara. And we pray for the homes around our church, dear Lord, that you will continue to bless. And Father, we just want to pray for every husband, that we may learn to love our spouse and love our children the way that you have set out what love is really is. And so we want to pray for our wives as well, dear Lord, that you may bless them. Bless all the children, Lord, as well. And we just want to pray for those who may looking for that person that you have set for them, that you will continue to bless them, Lord, and lead them to that right person. And Father, so we also want to pray a special prayer for our presenters, Lord God, as well. We thank you for their time that they have come to share with us. And so we pray for Dr. Fisher, Dr. Craig, and also Pastor Kenneth, that you will bless them, dear Lord, and bless their wives and their children. And most importantly, that you'll continue to prepare them for your second coming, dear Lord. So we thank you for all that you continue to do for each and every one of us. In Jesus' wonderful name we pray. Amen.